Good morning, everyone. Welcome to ABC News Live. Our top stories this morning, we're taking a look at the devastation in Indonesia after a massive earthquake and tsunami hit the region. We will check in with our correspondent there. We're also checking in on the latest in that FBI investigation into Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. We will find out who the FBI is now questioning, who they're done questioning, and what's ahead for the rest of the week. And then the latest over at the White House. President Trump commenting on both Kavanaugh and that trade deal as the First Lady gets ready to take her first overseas solo trip. All that coming up right after these headlines.
The investigation continues in Georgia after a high school football player suffered a head injury during a game and then died. 16-year-old Dylan Thomas passed out during Friday's game.
An outstanding young man on the football field. I mean, he's just a fighter.
Parts of the Las Vegas Strip going dark last night to mark a year since the massacre that left 58 people dead.
And a warning to travelers heading to New Zealand. Be ready to unlock your phone for inspection or face a $3,000 fine. The New York Times says New Zealand is the first country in the world that will fine people who refuse to unlock their phones for security checks. Hundreds of thousands of Amazon workers across the country are getting a pay raise in a few weeks. Amazon Senior VP Dave Clark tells ABC they're setting a new company-wide minimum wage.
We evaluated the federal minimum wage at $7.25. We think it's too low. We looked at what other companies have done, and we said $15 is the place we want to be, but we want to go now. So we decided to launch November 1st. Just in time for the holiday for all our employees.
Clark also says Amazon will work with Congress to try and push the national minimum wage higher.
HP is trying something new on one of its new laptops. The Spectre Folio laptop will be bound in leather. The FAA is now investigating after a Pennsylvania State Police helicopter buzzed a bunch of tailgaters before a Penn State game over the weekend. Everything from tents to grills went flying as the chopper flew over the crowd. Troopers say it was being used to disperse a crowd that was getting out of hand and refusing to leave.
We're going to start things off with that Supreme Court nomination and confirmation battle. The FBI has until Friday now to complete their investigation into those allegations against Brett Kavanaugh. And now an incident at a bar in 1985 is raising some questions. Terry Moran has the latest on all of it for us from D.C. Terry, what's the latest on this?
Well, the FBI's investigation is proceeding and expanding on this very tight deadline. They were given 1 week to look at all the, quote, credible allegations that were out there against Judge Brett Kavanaugh when it concerns his alleged sexual misconduct in high school and college. And at first, it seemed that the FBI, at the direction of the White House, was taking a very narrow road to answering those questions. It now looks like they've expanded. There's 24 and more witnesses that are being interviewed. They've fanned out across the country. And you're right, there's new stuff coming over the transom with this police report that came out from when Judge Kavanaugh was at Yale Law School, and he was part of an altercation at a bar. He threw a beer in somebody's face. This may or may not be used to cast some light on the level of his drinking back then, which may or may not relate to whether he blacked out and can't remember the alleged sexual assault. So it is a thoroughgoing investigation, it seems, at this point, but on this incredibly tight timeline of these allegations that Dr. Christine Blasey Ford and Karen Ramirez and Julie Swetnick, 3 women who have all accused Brett Kavanaugh of sexual misconduct when he was a very young man.
And Terry, some Democrats are trying to imply that Kavanaugh may have downplayed his drinking during the hearing, may have, fudged the truth when talking about his yearbook entry, for example, and they're suggesting this could be perjury. Any chance that gains traction?
Well, there's no question that there are two avenues that senators are going to be considering, although we should say almost all the Republicans are going to vote for Kavanaugh no matter what the FBI does. Almost all the Democrats are going to vote against Kavanaugh no matter what the FBI does. This is something of a sham. That said, what they'll look at are what he did or alleged to have done as a young man, the alleged sexual misconduct. There's been no evidence, no allegations of him as an adult, and how he testified before the Senate. Was he completely truthful? And that's where did he cover up, or did he play fast and loose with the truth when it came to his drinking? Perjury's a very extreme statement, and it might be difficult to prove, but that's not what senators have to do. They have to say, can we trust this person to put him on the Supreme Court of the United States? And that's a very different standard altogether. So it will matter whether or not he, according to Chad Ludington, who raised this allegation against him, got into a bar fight because he was drunk, other people observing a lot of drinking that he did. Was he straight with the Senate about all that? That's a legitimate question.
All right. And then, you know, on GMA this morning, Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse spoke to George a little bit about his thoughts on the investigation. He's obviously pretty happy that it's happening, but about this new expansion. I want you to hear what he said.
I think I'm satisfied. We don't know all the details yet, but clearly if they have been given free rein to interview whomever they want, then that's a very good sign. The last thing we want is a sham investigation. I also think that there's a fairly small universe of witnesses here and a very big FBI. So yes, I think they probably should be able to get this done by Friday if they really put the effort into it.
So, Terry, one, I think I'm satisfied, and two, they should get this done in time. What happens if at the end of this, Dems say this wasn't enough? And what happens if the FBI asks for more time?
Well, if the FBI asks for more time, that will put President Trump on the spot, but he'll have no choice. It'll look like he's cutting off the investigation and covering it up. On the other hand, you know, will Democrats say that this was not a sufficient enough investigation? My hunch is that's a pretty good bet, considering Sheldon Whitehouse himself is going to vote against Brett Kavanaugh. He's already said it doesn't matter what's in the investigation. And put yourself on the Republican side of the aisle for a moment. This does look like perhaps a very serious matter to be investigated, but one that was deployed, if you will, from their perspective by Democrats, not to get at the truth about a judge, but to block a judge they already didn't like. And I think that what we have is a very fierce partisan battle, as we always do. And at the end of the day, it's going to come down to power, raw power, not truth, not should we investigate more, but who's got the votes.
You know, on Friday, Terry, you called it a compromise, but not a miracle. I suppose we shouldn't expect too much.
That's well put.
Terry Moran from D.C. Always great to talk to you, Terry. Thanks. And sticking in D.C., that expanded investigation into Brett Kavanaugh came at the authorization of the president, saying he wants this investigation to be comprehensive. Kenneth Moton is at the White House with the latest on what's going on with the president today. And Kenneth, you know, originally the White House counsel placed some limits on this investigation. Why this reversal?
Diane, pressure. It all comes down to the pressure placed on President Trump and Senate Republicans when it comes to how they've handled Brett Kavanaugh and these sex assault allegations against him. There was a lot of confusion yesterday, Diane. The president said he was doing what the Senate wanted, and it was unclear about the exact order to the FBI. Now we know the scope is no longer limited. Late start for the president after a late night on the campaign trail, slamming Democrats and how they've handled Kavanaugh. The president rallied supporters in Johnson City, Tennessee, and strongly defended Kavanaugh. No surprise here, Diane. We know when the president hits the trail and he's in front of his base, the rhetoric really ramps up. He told the crowd they can't allow themselves to be pushed around by the Democrats. And there's only one reason: the Dems wanted that FBI investigation to keep his nominee from the high court. Take a listen.
The Democrats only know how to obstruct, demolish, and destroy. As we've seen in recent weeks, Democrats are willing to do anything and to hurt anyone to get their way, like they're doing with Judge Kavanaugh. And he's a good man, great student, great intellect. Never had a problem. All of a sudden, oh, let's go back to high school. They maybe should go before high school.
So the president, they're saying there is no investigation that would be good enough for the Democrats, Diane.
All right. And Kenneth, the other big announcement from the White House yesterday was this trade deal with Canada and Mexico. The president seems very proud of it. What are the chances that it actually passes, and what are some of the pros and cons being argued about it?
Great question as we talk about the next steps here, Diane. I want to get right to a presidential tweet that just came across. The president really happy with this trade deal with Canada and Mexico. He says, great reviews on the new USMCA. Thank you. Mexico and Canada will be wonderful partners in trade and more long into the future. Diane, because NAFTA has such a good ring, I think I'll call this USMCA, USMCA. Just because, yeah. So
I think you should stick to reporting, Kenneth, and leave naming things to the pros, whoever that may
be. Well, the president said he's good at branding here, but I don't know about USMCA. Yes, Diane, the president is really riding high on this new trade deal. He's riding so high, he's taking Air Force One on up to Philadelphia to really tout this new trade deal. He's speaking in front of 10,000 people who are attending the National Electrical Contractors Association convention. He'll talk about what his administration is doing to help small businesses and the workforce. So we expect the president will touch on the new trade deal and this NAFTA 2.0, NAFTA replacement that his administration says will boost manufacturing and lead to higher wages. You know, today, Diane, analysts and experts and the Democrats, they're reading the fine print here to really see what this deal has in it, to make sure and to really back up the president's claims that he says that workers, this is good for them. He's getting some bipartisan praise today, but this agreement still has a long way to go when it comes to Congress. The political reality here, Diane, is that there's no reason for Democrats to work with the president on this trade deal before the November midterms. And so it could be until the new Congress is seated in 2019 before this agreement is even passed.
Yeah, we saw Senator Chuck Schumer praise the president yesterday. That was something. So we've got Flake causing a compromise over Kavanaugh, and we've got Schumer praising the president. Maybe we do have a miracle in Washington forming slowly.
All over USMCA.
You can't, you're naming it. You can't even say it. All right, Kenneth, and finally, I know the president is sort of traveling the country, touting all these things. The First Lady, meanwhile, is heading for her first solo overseas trip. What do we know about that?
Yeah, so she just touched down in Africa for her first big solo trip as First Lady. It'll be a busy week in Africa for the First Lady. It's part of her Be Best initiative that encompasses a broad array of issues affecting children's well-being. Mrs. Trump will visit schools and hospitals. She will focus on mothers and newborn care. To learn more about the role of USAID, which is the U.S. Agency for International Development, the First Lady will also make stops in Malawi, Kenya, and Egypt. All right. So a big trip for the First Lady there, Diane.
Sounds like a good one. Kenneth Moton from the White House. Thanks, Kenneth.
Thank you.
And now let's go over to Indonesia, where the race is on to find survivors after that massive earthquake and tsunami. The death toll is rising as we're getting some new images of the devastation there. You can see a before and after of the level of destruction caused by this natural disaster. ABC's James Longman is at the hospital where some of the injured are being treated. James?
Hi, Diane. I'm at the hospital in Makassar, which is a town on Sulawesi Island in the south of the island, of course, the place where that massive earthquake and tsunami hit on Friday. And it's to this hospital and many others in this area that the injured are being flown down from Palu on Hercules aircraft and being treated. Palu, the town in the very north, which has been the focus of the rescue effort, a town of about 250,000 people. And it's in that place, of course, that we've seen those extraordinary pictures of that wall of water coming ashore, 20 feet wall of water in some places. And of course, the earthquake itself ripping through homes, killing at least, we now know, 1,200 people. But that number is surely going to rise. We've seen these horrific pictures of mass graves being dug, body bags in the street. But this is one of the places where people have been congregating to find out about their loved ones. Just through here, families wait for news because many of them, they may live here, they may not have anywhere to go. And so they sit camped out waiting for news from their loved ones inside. We actually just had the luck to speak to one young girl, a 12-year-old girl, who told me that she had her leg broken when the earthquake came. Her house, the floor just split in half. And she said that it was like a dream. She had really no idea what was happening to her. Her father was there. He managed to save her. And we also had an extraordinary moment where we met a father of triplets. His wife was heavily pregnant when the tsunami and the earthquake hit. they managed to get evacuated, and last night she had an emergency C-section, and he was very happy to tell me that all 3 babies, 1 little boy and 2 little girls, and mother, they're all doing well. So that's a brief glimmer of hope from amongst all these awful stories. But you know, we're going to hear more and more of these personal stories as this story develops. We're going to hopefully be able to go north to Palu, to the area where it's been most badly hit, and just see for ourselves the extent of the destruction. But for now, back to you, Diane.
All right, James. Glad for that little glimmer of joy at least, and make sure you stay safe as well. And now let's get to that 13-year-old seriously injured in a shark attack in Southern California. The boy is still in the hospital, but his mom is now speaking out about the extent of his injuries and why the boy says he wants to get back in the water. ABC's Will Carr is in Encinitas, California with that story. Will?
Good morning, Diane. Keen Webry Hayes' family says he is lucky to be alive this morning after he was lobster diving about 200 yards from where we're standing right now on this beach over the weekend when an 11-foot shark attacked him, biting into his upper body. Now, there were some other people on the water at the time. They were able to hoist Keen into a kayak and then raced him here to the beach. Now, they say while that was happening, the shark was actually trailing Keen and the kayak because there was so much blood in the water. So it was a rather intense situation. Once they got him up onto this beach, I want to show you it's not easy to get access here. You have to go up these switchbacks. You can see a surfer actually walking up the trail right now. A lifeguard drove up. You can see a video of it. He ended up having to call in a helicopter, and they air evacuated Keen to a local children's hospital where he's expected to make a full recovery after some major surgeries that he went through. His mom is now saying that it is really a miracle that he is a warrior for being able to survive this. She says that once he gets out of the hospital, he plans on making his family a lobster dinner because remember, he was lobster diving when this attack happens. Now, he's already had a little bit of food. The 2 things that he's had and requested so far were a donut and a cup of noodles. And in case you're wondering too, we asked his mom if Keen ever plans on going back in the water because this is such an intense, scary situation for anybody, let alone a 13-year-old. She says that he does plan on going back in the water because his own words are that there's a slim chance that anybody would be bit twice. Diane.
All right. The odds, I suppose, are in his favor. Besides, somebody has to catch the lobster if he's going to make lobster dinner for the family. Will Carr and Encinitas, glad to see the boys' spirits are up. And now let's see if our spirits are up after we find out what the weather has in store for us today. Ginger Z has the forecast from the Weather Center. Ginger?
Diane, thank you. You know, it's such a bittersweet image when you see the satellite picture over the Southwest because this is an area that desperately needs rain, a lot of them in severe drought, but you see this much coming this quickly and it's from what's left of Rosa. It's not that great of news because it can come so fast you get flash flooding. So there are flash flood watches that go all the way from far southern Idaho right through Utah into Arizona, even Colorado and Nevada have some. See that next system that's coming into the West Coast right there in California? That's going to add to this. So you could see in some places 2 to 3 inches of rain. These are places that if you get a ½ inch of rain, it can be pretty problematic. Just like it was in Iowa, right? So flash flooding happened there, and this is all along the same front that's going to give a severe thunderstorm possibility for a large region in the east today, from Cleveland, Ohio, right through much of Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, you're included there, Harrisburg too, and Binghamton, New York. Even far northwestern New Jersey has to look out. It's this afternoon and evening, mostly going to look for a damaging wind of 60+ miles per hour. Remember, that's the type, Diane, that takes down power lines and trees easily. This is something we could see here on our Tuesday evening into even the overnight far east.
All right, Ginger Z with the weather forecast. Thanks, Ginger. And Amazon has just announced that it will be raising its company-wide minimum wage to $15 an hour for all part-time, full-time, temp, and seasonal employees. Here's what Senior Vice President Dave Clark told us this morning.
$7.25. We think it's too low. We looked at what other companies have done, and we said $15 is the place we want to be. But we want to go now. So we decided to launch November 1st, just in time for the holiday for all our employees.
And this was the reaction in Eastville, California at the Amazon there as they revealed the news. You can hear the workers. Wait for it. The crowd goes wild. Now, this all comes after Amazon was receiving some criticism over what it was paying some of its workers. The company now says it's inviting its competitors to do the same, and it will also have its public policy team start advocating for a raise in the federal minimum wage. And that does it for us here at ABC News Live. Remember, you can catch the day's headlines all day long at abcnews.com or on your ABC News app. For ABC News Live, I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for watching, everyone.